Ashley Floor, and you know what I'm talking about here on my channel right now.
Blake Lively walked into the courtroom glowing, polished, and visibly confident, the way someone looks when they believe the worst is already behind them. Cameras flashed. Headlines were already drafted. For a brief moment, it seemed like she had done the impossible, defeated Justin Baldoni cleanly, silenced her critics, and walked away from a brutal legal battle without a scratch. But that glow didn't last. What initially looked like a triumphant legal victory began to unravel almost immediately, spiraling into what insiders would later describe as a full-blown meltdown. And at the center of that collapse stood an unexpected figure, Ryan Reynolds. Her husband. The man who, until that moment, had stayed completely silent. The night of June 10th was chaos in the entertainment world. Social media exploded with celebration as major outlets declared Blake Lively the clear winner in her court battle against Justin Baldoni. Industry insiders rushed to frame the ruling as a clean sweep, a decisive end to months of speculation and controversy. For a few short hours, it genuinely appeared that Blake had crushed Baldoni's claims and emerged untouched. Publicists celebrated quietly. Supporters congratulated loudly. The narrative was simple. Blake Lively won, but beneath the glossy PR statements and congratulatory tweets, the victory was already hollow. By the next morning, legal blogs and independent case trackers began publishing updates that Blake's team never expected the public to notice. Buried deep inside procedural filings was a detail that changed everything. Two of Justin Baldoni's most critical claims had not been defeated on their merits. They were not argued, debated, or disproven. They were quietly dismissed, without trial, without discovery, and without public explanation. That distinction mattered more than anyone initially realized. These weren't minor side claims. They weren't technical footnotes. They were the backbone of Baldoni's lawsuit. The first claim centered on creative control and Baldoni's rights as a co-producer. He alleged that Blake Lively had systematically sidelined him throughout the production, rewriting scenes without approval, overriding casting decisions, excluding him from key meetings, and effectively hijacking the project to reshape it according to her own vision. According to Baldoni, his authority was stripped away piece by piece until his role became symbolic rather than real. The second claim was even more explosive. Baldoni alleged that Blake failed to disclose pre-existing financial and contractual relationships linking her to a private investment group backing the production. In other words, while presenting herself publicly as merely the film star, she was allegedly influencing budget decisions and steering financial outcomes behind the scenes. If true, it suggested she was operating on both sides of the project, artist and financial power broker, without transparency. Allegations like that strike directly at the heart of conflict of interest law, yet Judge Alan Lemon dismissed both claims. His explanation was vague to the point of discomfort. He cited procedural grounds and a supposed lack of specificity, despite observers pointing out that Baldoni's filings included detailed documentation, internal memos, email chains, and partial contract records. Baldoni's legal team appeared prepared for discovery. Instead, the pillars of their case were removed without a hearing. Legally, the dismissals were labeled without prejudice. Practically, they were devastating. By discarding the only two claims capable of truly cornering Blake Lively, the court gutted the lawsuit. What remained were fragmented accusations of general misconduct and workplace tension, claims Blake's attorneys could easily minimize. Almost immediately, murmurs began spreading through the legal community. Dismissing such core allegations without allowing discovery was highly unusual. Some called it concerning. Others quietly used a stronger word, alarming. Within days, Baldoni's attorneys filed a Rule 60(b) motion requesting reconsideration of the dismissals, citing concerns over compromised judicial integrity. The filing was carefully worded but unmistakably serious. It suggested that something fundamental had gone wrong with Judge Lemon's decision. Then the leaks began. Information surfaced revealing that Judge Alan Lemon had a brother, Noah Lemon, a well-known Hollywood director who had previously collaborated with Blake Lively on a high-profile charity campaign in 2019. On its own, that connection might have been harmless. But combined with rulings that erased the most damaging claims against Blake, the optics shifted dramatically. What once looked questionable now looked explosive, or worse. Insiders began reporting quiet meetings between Blake's PR representatives and individuals connected to Judge Lemon's chambers in the days leading up to the hearing. None of this had been disclosed. The image of a clean legal win began to rot from the inside, reframing the outcome not as a victory, but as a favor. And then Ryan Reynolds broke his silence throughout the trial. Ryan had remained conspicuously absent from the narrative. No interviews. No public statements. No supportive posts. Reporters speculated endlessly about his loyalty. Fans debated whether his silence was strategic or strained. But on June 11th at exactly 6:17 a.m., Ryan posted a single Instagram story. A black screen. White text. 11 words. Justice isn't a Netflix script. Directors don't cast judges. No emojis. No names. No explanation. It was enough. Within minutes, the post was screenshot, reposted, and dissected across Twitter, TikTok, and every Hollywood gossip page imaginable. The message named no one, yet said everything. Bloggers tore apart the phrasing. Legal analysts weighed in. The meaning was unmistakable. Ryan knew something. And more importantly, he was no longer protecting Blake. Industry insiders later described the post as a sledgehammer. It cracked the narrative wide open. Conversations that had been happening quietly behind closed doors suddenly spilled into the open. Sources who had stayed silent felt emboldened. Legal teams started talking. The tone of coverage shifted almost overnight. Inside Blake's camp, panic reportedly set in. According to one source, Blake spiraled after seeing the post, screaming that Ryan had betrayed her and didn't understand what was at stake. The reaction didn't read like innocence. It read like fear. Because once Ryan publicly hinted that something was wrong, the entire structure holding Blake's victory together began to collapse. By the afternoon, whispers had turned into headlines. Legal commentators openly questioned Judge Lemon's rulings. Baldoni's attorneys pushed deeper. And for the first time, the court itself fell under scrutiny. Judge Alan Lemon, the man who had delivered Blake her so-called win, was now reportedly facing internal review. What began as a celebrity courtroom feud was rapidly transforming into something far more dangerous, a potential judicial scandal with federal implications, and this was only the beginning. Once Ryan Reynolds' Instagram story went live, the machinery behind Blake Lively's supposed courtroom victory began grinding in reverse. What had been framed as a decisive win now looked disturbingly fragile, and the silence that followed from Blake's camp only deepened suspicion. For weeks, Ryan had avoided the spotlight entirely, refusing interviews, declining to comment, and sidestepping every question about his wife's legal battle. That silence had been interpreted as loyalty, or at least strategic restraint. But his single post changed the meaning of everything that came before it. It wasn't vague. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, and insiders understood that immediately. Within hours, legal teams across New York began quietly revisiting the docket. Bloggers who specialized in procedural law pointed out details the mainstream press had ignored. Case trackers highlighted anomalies in the timing of the dismissals. And then the leaks began circulating privately: screenshots, emails, fragments of internal correspondence that suggested Baldoni's legal team hadn't simply lost, but had been shut out. The most damaging revelation centered on a line allegedly forwarded to Ryan Reynolds by a disgruntled former staffer connected to Blake's crisis management team. The email was timestamped May 17 at 3:12 p.m., just 6 days before Judge Alan Lemon dismissed Baldoni's two most critical claims. The sentence was short, casual, and devastating: "Let's get Alan to bury it." That line alone reframed the entire case. According to sources familiar with Ryan's reaction, he was stunned when he saw it. Not confused. Not skeptical. Disgusted. The implication was unmistakable. Someone inside Blake's inner circle believed Judge Lemon could be influenced, and worse, believed that influence was already in motion. Ryan reportedly confronted Blake that same week, demanding an explanation and urging her to come clean before the press uncovered everything. According to a longtime associate speaking anonymously to a Hollywood burner account, Blake dismissed the concerns, insisting the rulings were procedural and that the optics would blow over. They didn't. As word of the email spread quietly among legal insiders, Baldoni's attorneys moved fast. Less than 48 hours after Ryan's Instagram post, court records showed attorney Melissa Jerky filed a supplemental motion requesting an evidentiary review of undisclosed private correspondence between the defendant's PR affiliates and third-party individuals connected to the judicial bench. It was a bold move, and one that signaled Baldoni's team now believed the issue extended beyond civil disagreement into potential judicial misconduct. That motion brought a new name into focus: Diane Reynolds. Reynolds had been an administrative assistant within Judge Alan Lemon's chambers. 2 weeks before the dismissal ruling, she had resigned abruptly. At the time, her departure went unnoticed. But now, Baldoni's team wanted to know why. Initially unreachable, Reynolds finally agreed to speak on June 9 under Rule 801(d)(2, which allows certain admissions into evidence even when the speaker is not a formal witness. What she reportedly disclosed cracked the case wide open. Reynolds described an incident from May 19, just 4 days before the ruling, when she overheard a closed-door conversation in Judge Lemon's office. The judge was not alone. The man with him was later identified through LinkedIn records as Noah Lemon, his older brother. According to Reynolds, Judge Lemon appeared tense, distracted, almost frightened. She recalled him repeating phrases like, "It's bigger than both of us, and I'm doing this once, but never again." At the time, the comments meant nothing to her. But after Baldoni's strongest claims vanished from the docket, those words took on a chilling clarity. Reynolds didn't stop there as she provided investigators with a detailed timeline cross-referenced against courthouse access logs, internal scheduling records, and calendar inconsistencies. What emerged was a pattern: undocumented meetings, unexplained gaps, and quiet interactions converging at exactly the moment Blake Lively's legal nightmare was supposed to end. Security logs reportedly revealed for undocumented meetings between members of Blake's PR team and individuals connected to Judge Lemon's chambers between May 14 and May 22. None were officially recorded. No visitor badges were issued. No appointment entries logged. No email scheduling trails existed to explain them. Only blacked-out calendar gaps and unexplained discrepancies. Reynolds claimed she captured screenshots of those logs before resigning. When asked during her deposition why she quit so abruptly, her answer was blunt: she was not willing to be part of a cover-up. That statement alone escalated the situation from scandal to crisis. At the center of the formal complaint was an even more explosive allegation: that Noah Lemon had received a payment totaling $1.2 million through a consulting entity known as Graywave Consulting LLC. According to filings, the money originated from a Delaware-based investment fund with documented ties to Blake Lively's public relations operation. If true, the payment represented a direct and material conflict of interest that had never been disclosed during court proceedings. The implications were staggering. The complaint cited Reynolds' sworn testimony alongside her detailed timeline of undocumented interactions, prompting the New York Commission on Judicial Conduct to confirm receipt of the complaint at exactly 2:14 p.m. Legal watchdog organizations immediately began monitoring the case. But Baldoni's legal team didn't stop there. Alongside the misconduct complaint, they filed a sweeping motion demanding that the entire case be escalated to the Appellate Division of the New York Supreme Court. The motion spanned 97 pages and cited Rule 221 of New York Civil Procedure, which allows review when new evidence emerges or judicial behavior calls the integrity of a ruling into question. The filing incorporated newly surfaced bank transfer records, internal PR strategy memoranda, and communications between Artisan Circle Media and members of the Lemon family, materials never disclosed during the initial trial. And in a move that stunned observers, Baldoni's attorneys included a secondary request: if state-level escalation proved insufficient, the matter should be transferred to federal court under Title 28, Section 1443 of the United States Code. This provision is designed to protect litigants from civil rights violations committed under color of state law. Baldoni's team argued his right to a fair and impartial hearing had been deliberately undermined. Legal experts began weighing in publicly. Professor Marlene Kessler of Columbia Law School stated during a June 13 appearance on New York Legal Scope Live that documented financial ties between a judge's immediate family and a party's financial backers are textbook grounds for mandatory recusal and retroactive invalidation of rulings. If the financial trail held, she said, the entire case could unravel. Those concerns gained traction when, within hours of the complaint becoming public, a federal observer affiliated with the Southern District of New York initiated a preliminary review. A leaked confidential memo dated June 13 at 8:37 a.m. indicated that at least 2 federal judges had been briefed on the possibility of forcibly removing the case from the state docket due to compromised judicial integrity. Meanwhile, Baldoni's team opened another front on June 14. They filed a separate civil litigation notice directly naming Blake Lively as an individual defendant. The filing accused her of judicial process tampering, indirect bribery, and fraudulent concealment. It sought damages exceeding $25 million and requested a permanent injunction barring her from participating in any legal matters connected to the production. For the first time, criminal exposure entered the conversation. On June 15, former federal prosecutor Jason Miles stated on Justice Broadcast that if the alleged payment routed through Grey Wave Consulting could be definitively linked to Blake's camp as a quid pro quo for judicial favor, she could face a Class C felony under New York Penal Law Section 200.45. The statute, he explained, does not require money to go directly to a judge, only that someone close to the judge receive a benefit intended to influence a decision. As Blake's legal team remained publicly silent, internal sources claimed her crisis firm, Fenwick Collective, went into lockdown. By June 16, Blake cancelled 3 public appearances and quietly withdrew from the Greenwich Film Symposium, where she had been scheduled as a keynote speaker. Media outlets began publishing detailed breakdowns of every documented interaction between her representatives and the Lemon Circle. What had once been a celebratory narrative was now collapsing under the weight of evidence, and behind the scenes, the pressure was only beginning. By the morning of June 13, Blake Lively's attempt to control the narrative had completely collapsed. What began as whispers inside legal circles had now spilled into the public sphere, and every attempt to contain it only seemed to accelerate the damage. Paparazzi stationed outside New York County Supreme Court captured Blake exiting the building at exactly 9:52 a.m., wearing oversized dark sunglasses, her head down, refusing to respond to shouted questions about the active judicial complaint and the alleged $1.2 million transfer linked to Noah Lemon. Multiple photographers later commented that she appeared visibly shaken, describing her as almost unrecognizable compared to the confident figure who had entered the case weeks earlier. The images spread instantly. Within hours, they were syndicated across TMZ, Shutterbuzz, SleuthNow, and a dozen international outlets. Social media latched on immediately. By noon, Blake Breakdown was trending across Twitter and TikTok, fueled by side-by-side comparisons of her courtroom confidence versus her current silence. Commentators speculated openly about her mental state, while others questioned whether the pressure was finally catching up to her. Then, just as suddenly as the coverage exploded, Blake vanished from public view. No statements followed. No clarifications. No denials. Ryan Reynolds went completely dark as well. His social media accounts remained untouched. No likes. No stories. No engagement. According to a close family friend speaking anonymously to Star Signal, Ryan's last known communication was a brief call to his agent. He reportedly said only that he had said what needed to be said and that the rest was no longer his to manage. Whether that silence was strategic, emotional, or both became a matter of speculation, but the damage was already done. Behind the scenes, the legal process continued without pause. During a sealed session on June 16, a federal liaison confirmed that the matter had officially been placed under federal review. A formal petition was underway to transfer the case to the Southern District of New York, a jurisdiction known for handling high-profile financial misconduct cases and enforcing far stricter evidentiary standards than state court. Baldoni's transfer request, filed under Title 28 U.S.C. Section 1443, was placed under expedited review, with a decision expected by June 21 ST. At the same time, Judge Alan Lemon's position became untenable. On June 15, following recommendations from the New York Commission on Judicial Conduct, Lemon was formally recused from presiding over any future celebrity-related civil suits pending a full investigation. An internal memo reviewed by Lawline Daily cited potential integrity concerns and undisclosed conflicts requiring immediate containment. Though Judge Lemon released no public statement, his chambers reportedly entered complete lockdown. Staff were instructed to route all inquiries directly to Commission counsel. Phones went unanswered. Calendars were scrubbed. Files were sealed for legal observers. The message was clear. This was no longer being treated as a routine ethics inquiry. A momentum had decisively shifted with Judge Lemon sidelined and Blake Lively under active federal scrutiny. Justin Baldoni's legal team now held the upper hand. Courtroom insiders described a dramatic change in atmosphere. Where Baldoni's attorneys had once appeared boxed in, they were now dictating pace and tone. Public sentiment followed suit. Commentators who had once dismissed Baldoni's claims as sour grapes began revisiting early filings with fresh eyes. Every detail Blake's team had hoped would be forgotten was now being re-examined. Civil rights attorney Vera Tomino stated bluntly on the Legal Fallout podcast that there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, adding that Blake's position was rapidly shifting from celebrity litigant to potential criminal respondent. It was a statement that would have seemed absurd just days earlier. Now, it felt disturbingly plausible to inside Blake's camp. The situation was unraveling even faster. According to a leak from Fennec Collective, the crisis strategy firm Blake hired in February, she completely lost composure after Ryan's Instagram post went live. At approximately 8:43 a.m. on June 11th, during a closed strategy call, Blake allegedly screamed, "He's going to ruin everything. He's not supposed to do this." The outburst was reportedly heard by at least 6 staffers. 2 later confirmed the incident to Page Pulse under strict anonymity. One claimed Blake accused Ryan of colluding with Baldoni's legal team, a theory her own lawyers quickly dismissed but not before it appeared in multiple tabloid headlines. By the afternoon of June 13th, Fennec Collective officially dropped Blake as a client. Their statement was brief and carefully worded, citing a fundamental breakdown in client transparency. In industry terms, the message was unmistakable. The firm believed it had been misled. That conclusion was reinforced when internal Slack messages leaked by a laid-off assistant revealed Fennec had been blindsided by financial documents linking Blake's media partners to Noah Lemon. Documents that had never been disclosed when the firm built its original strategy around judicial fairness and procedural victory. By 6 p.m. that evening, Fennec removed all campaign materials involving Blake. The fallout spread quickly. On June 14th, Netflix quietly removed Blake's upcoming interview special, Conversations with Courage, from its internal release calendar. The program had been scheduled for a July 2nd launch and featured Blake discussing integrity in the arts and authentic storytelling alongside filmmaker Ava Carlin. The irony was not lost on industry observers. While neither Netflix nor Blake's representatives publicly addressed the move, sources inside the streamer's marketing division told TV Scope the decision was mutual following recent developments raising reputational concerns. By then, Blake's carefully curated image was disintegrating piece by piece. A legal pressure mounted. Professional isolation deepened. Public skepticism hardened. And the crisis no longer appeared containable. As federal scrutiny intensified, Baldoni's legal team pressed forward aggressively. Investigators began tracing financial flows connected to Greywave Consulting LLC, focusing on whether the alleged $1.2 million payment could be conclusively tied back to Blake's public relations apparatus. Banking records, shell entities, and intermediary accounts were scrutinized. According to sources close to the investigation, the financial trail was messy but not invisible. Former federal prosecutor Jason Miles reiterated on June 15 that the legal threshold for criminal exposure did not require direct payment to a judge. Under New York law, intent to influence an official proceeding through benefits to someone close to the judge could be sufficient. That interpretation dramatically raised the stakes. What had once been a civil dispute now carried the shadow of criminal liability. By June 17, the case had become the dominant topic in legal and entertainment media alike. Courtroom Confidential, Law and Light, and Radar Daily published exhaustive timelines mapping every known interaction between Blake's representatives and the Lemon family. Independent journalists cross-checked courthouse logs, donor records, and non-profit filings. Each new detail reinforced the sense that this was not an isolated lapse, but a coordinated effort to manage outcomes behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Blake remained largely invisible. Sources claimed she stayed in New York, attending closed-door legal briefings and preparing for what many now described as the most difficult chapter of her career. Studios distanced themselves quietly. Invitations disappeared. Project stalled. The conversation in Hollywood shifted away from whether she would win the lawsuit to whether she could survive the fallout at all. Ryan Reynolds' silence only amplified the uncertainty. To some, it looked like abandonment. To others, it looked like damage control. But for many insiders, his decision to speak once, and then disappear, was the most telling move of all. He hadn't defended Blake. He hadn't denied the allegations. He hadn't softened the implications. He had simply stepped aside and let the process unfold. As of June 21, the federal transfer decision loomed. Judge Alan Lemon remained under investigation. Baldoni's claims, once dismissed without a hearing, were now positioned for possible revival under far stricter oversight. And Blake Lively, who just days earlier had walked out of court smirking beneath flashing cameras, now faced a reality no amount of PR could rewrite. The Hollywood ending had vanished. What remained was a reckoning, legal, professional, and personal, playing out in real time, with consequences that could extend far beyond a single case. Whether Blake would ultimately clear her name or become a cautionary tale was no longer a question of spin, but of evidence, and for the first time since the story began,